Hello, it's me, the anti-black Barbie, the all-watchful eye of anti-blackness. So before we get started, I want to say thank you to every single person who's tuned in so far. I cannot believe that we're at 820 subscribers and over 2,000 hours of watch time. So to say that this page has exceeded my expectations is an understatement. I do plan on venturing out and hosting things like panels when I get a little bit more confidence, because I would love to be able to hear from some of you all directly, but I don't want to get too ahead of myself. I would first like to introduce you all to the Colorist collections. So if you all weren't really sure what I do on my primary social media page, which is Twitter, most of my time is spent in the Black queer sector, where I tend to battle colorists and racists. A lot of my interactions on Twitter don't typically make it over to my YouTube page, because making a 10 to 15 minute video on a single person can actually be very taxing. However, lumping several of them into one 10 to 15 minute video sounds a lot more appealing to me. And that being said, let's get started, shall we? So if I were to tell you that these two people were the exact same person, would you believe me? Well, I'm here to let you in on a little secret. They are. Now, before I unpack this anti-black minstrelsy that's obviously happening, I want to go ahead and lay the foundation of how we got here in the first place. So a week or two ago, someone by the name of Kellon Deryck, who is a popular social media figure and model, came online and did a little tease of the person that he's talking to. Now, at first glance, you probably wouldn't think anything of this post, but when you scroll down a little bit in the comments section, someone did a little bit of investigating, and it doesn't seem like this person is quite who they say they are. If you're not somebody who watches a lot of singing competition shows, it probably went over your head, but this person actually goes by the name of Zayed Dolezal. They appeared on the show American Idol around the time it first started airing. They didn't get very far, but it was very meme-worthy, which is probably why people ended up remembering it.
Are you in? I am counting. 1, 2, 3, not only you and me. Got 180 degrees, and I'm caught in between counting. 1, 2, 3, even Paul and Matt agree. Get them down with 3P. Everybody loves.
I'll be honest with you all, I am at a loss for words as to how we got here. I originally really didn't think that these two were the same people. However, I did a little bit of investigating, and I actually noticed that outside of the fact that they do have similar facial features and around the same age, they both have a Chinese symbol on their left wrist at the exact same location, and they do share the same name. So I'm inclined to believe that this is the same person. Now, whether or not people believe that this is the same person really is irrelevant to me. My general point in making this segment is this is a non-black person who is cosplaying as somebody black. However, knowing what they looked like when they were younger really is just an added bonus. I mean, I think I could probably come up with my own narrative. In my mind, I believe that this person probably wasn't getting much attention in their own community, not because I would say that they're unattractive, but more so because the fact that they are feminine, and they also don't have the muscular body type that a lot of white men are looking for. I'm assuming at some point down the line of constantly being rejected, she probably found herself gravitating towards black men with very low racial self-esteem like this one. And not to drag in my own personal mess, but I feel like this entire scenario is very vindicating, because I remember a few months ago, me and my good Judy by the name of TruthSpeaker02, also known as the Colorist page, were having a conversation on the timeline about how Kellon Deryck had a pattern of dating people who were significantly lighter than him. Although because people are attracted to him and they have this weird parasocial relationship going on, I ended up getting called everything but a child of God. I mean, I even had several people who've been following me for years block me because I ended up pointing this out. And I just find it funny because now all of a sudden the people who wanted to gaslight conversations around colorism within black dating all of a sudden have an issue with him dating someone who is white who is now blackfishing. And a lot of people don't understand that these two things are connected. Most of the time, people don't just start out dating exclusively white. They work their way up the colorism ladder until they end up getting to the final stop. I mean, you can easily look to the last 5 people that he dated. He started off dating lighter skinned people, then he gradually moved up to people who were racially ambiguous, then he moved up to people who were non-black. And I know that some people are going to come in here and play devil's advocate and say that what if he didn't potentially know that this person was blackfishing? Well, after all of this went viral and he still decided to post multiple pictures with this person knowing that they are blackfishing, I think it's safe to say that whether or not he knew this person was black or not is irrelevant, because even after finding out they weren't, he still decided to go ahead and date this person anyways. And for me, I'm not even necessarily bothered by the fact that he's chosen to date a non-black person. It's more so the fact that he's okay with dating somebody who feels like it's appropriate to come online and cosplay as a black person. I'm just going to keep it very simple. Race is a social construct. Whether or not this person's grandma, grandpa, mom, dad is black, which I'm very confident that they are not, it doesn't change the fact that this person shows up in society as a white person. So as to why this person feels the need to draw so heavily onto black culture, mannerisms, hairstyle is not only confusing, but very unsettling to me. And I just want to reiterate that people who decide to blackfish are racist. It's one thing to draw on certain elements of our culture. It's another to completely co-opt our identity. A lot of people do this for a variety of different reasons. The first is that they enjoy the social capital that they get when they're around Black people. Most of them understand that colorism and anti-Blackness is running rampant in our community, so they use their proximity to whiteness in order for them to be put on a pedestal. The second is that I think a lot of them have very low opinions of Black people's intelligence, and they actually enjoy playing in their faces and actually getting away with it. Because the fact that this person is able to waltz around in a community that they are clearly not a part of, be prioritized by some of the most attractive and wealthy men of said community, and garner hundreds of thousands of followers from that same demographic, and getting all of this while not having to showcase a single ounce of proof that you are Black while receiving the benefits of that community is highly enticing to these people. And I hate to be so hyperbolic, but a lot of non-Black people truly do only view Black people as the help. Even if they may be getting into bed with them or even relationships with them, a lot of the time they view it as a stepping stone in order to achieve what they ordinarily wouldn't. I feel like if we were to take a deeper dive into Zaya Dolezal's history around the time of American Idol, I feel like it probably would be a story led with a lot of disappointment. Because while this person is white, they were still in an environment where they had to compete with other white people. Typically, when you have to compete with people of your own race, it's a lot harder for you to rest in your own mediocrity. That's why you see a lot of talentless non-Black people gravitate to these spaces, because they're able to capitalize how deeply immersiated Black people are into the one-drop rule and how committed they are to upholding it. And it just kills me how one-sided this scenario is, because if I were to throw on a synthetic wig to match some hair texture of a different culture and try to waltz around like I'm a part of their community, I would be instantly shut down and dismissed. It's only in the Black community that someone can have absolutely no features that reflect a Black person and people will still sit here and call them Black. And I think what's even more insulting is the fact that people try to tie someone being Black directly to their hair. Whether or not you shave my head bald or I'm wearing a full head of hair, people will still be able to tell that I'm Black. And I think that people who are so desperate to see Blackness where it's not there typically tend to have very low racial self-esteem. And I feel like based off of what I said a little bit earlier, a lot of these talking points really do seem to fit Kellon Deryck very well. And I want to put in a disclaimer that I clearly don't know every single person that he's dated privately, but I do know that the majority of the public people that he seemed to have dated have all been a certain complexion. Now, you all are entitled to call it a coincidence. I'm more inclined to call it a pattern. So in conclusion, I wish them both the worst, and I think that anybody who enables white people to engage in such racist behavior is no friend of mine. That being said, let's move on. So if you haven't been keeping up with my Twitter lately, which you should, you would have probably noticed me going back and forth on the timeline with the WhiteMansPig. No, literally. His name is WhiteMansPig. So to give a little bit of context about this one of my mutuals had given me some information about this person who has been acting very unruly on the timeline. One quick scroll through their page and I was immediately mortified. I'm not even exaggerating when I say this, but this page is a cesspool of anti-Blackness, colorism, and race play. One of the tweets that I highlighted was essentially them saying, the white male race will forever be on top. Whether other races agree or not, it's only a matter of time before they start buying N-words again. And I'm not even going to lie to you all, once I saw that tweet, it had me hot. I had to go ahead and figure out who is this person who is tweeting these things behind this anonymous account. And of course, my sources always come through, and we found out exactly who is tweeting it. So I'm happy to introduce you all to the donkey of the day. Based off his Instagram handle, he goes by the name of Alonzo Griffin. Now, I will say he changed it after my tweet went viral, and he ended up scrubbing his page of every single picture. But that's okay. I managed to screenshot the names he tagged of his friends, his family, and his job. Now, it seems like he got the memo to not mess with me, but in the event that he does, I would be happy to have a conversation and see what his family, his friends, and what his employment thinks of him saying these things. Because you don't get to be in community with Black people and say such horrible and vile things. Whether I know these people or not, I wouldn't want any Black person to be in orbit with somebody who thinks this lowly of other Black people. It's not safe, and I personally wouldn't recommend it. And I kind of say this in the tweet where I ended up dragging him, but if you're bold enough to say such racist and vile things, then you should be bold enough to put a face and name to it. I just think it's funny that every single time people who get confronted about things like this always shut their accounts off, always block, they never have anything to say. But any other time, they always want to proclaim to the world how happy they are being the white man's pig. And for me, I'm just like, what happened to all that spirit you had a moment ago? Him shutting off his page once we figured out who he was is confirmation that he understands exactly what's happening is wrong, but he feels like he's safe because he's doing it behind an anonymous account. And here's the thing, if you want to be a white man's pig on your own time, I mean, I feel bad for you, but I feel like you using your platform of 55,000 people to spread anti-Blackness, colorism, racism is never going to work for me. And I think it's so unfortunate because we have so many people with extremely large platforms who, rather than use them responsibly, they feed into these racist, anti-Black tropes that only set us further back. And I just want to throw something out there. There seems to be something very dark happening in California. It's like every single time I turn around, there is somebody exactly like this from California doing the same thing over and over and over again. And I'm not even somebody who prefers to throw out generalizations like that, but the amount of people who have landed on my page who I've noticed that were from California is very alarming to me. You all are entitled to do what you want, but I am not somebody who, at this point, would suggest trying to raise Black children in predominantly white environments. I think it's undeniable to say that something very dark is happening to Black people who are growing up in these predominantly white communities. I used to spend a lot of time on Reddit, and within my time there, I noticed that there was a lot of Black children who were barely turning 18 requesting race play. And I feel like a lot of people really don't understand how quickly a lot of Black children are being indoctrinated into these racist race play type scenarios, because no one's going to convince me that the white man's pig came out of the womb being back colonized. A lot of the times it's gradual progression of anti-Black imagery, anti-Black messaging, seeing anti-Black relationships play out in real life and being glorified. Society does a great job of conditioning our younger Black children, whether it's directly or indirectly, to center and prioritize these relationships, even at the cost of their own integrity and morals. And I don't want to make it seem like I'm making excuses for the white man's pig, because that's a grown-ass man who should know better. But I do think that it's important for us to start dissecting on how these people got here in the first place, so we can start pushing messaging to try and avoid it from happening in the future. Because whether or not people want to admit it, race play is becoming normalized. We were literally just listening to Shannon Sharp and that white girl who was half his age talking about how she wanted him to put his big Black babies inside of her. And as much as these people want to gaslight and deflect as to what is the foundation of their relationship, it's fairly obvious that when you look into their interactions, you see that there is an emphasis on race at every single turn. Now, whether or not this person learned their lesson is irrelevant to me. I was more so mainly trying to make an example out of them that you will not come on the timeline and use your large following to push such racist and anti-Black imagery. But I do hope that this person was able to take something away from our interaction. I think that a lot of these people feel like because they're on the internet that they have become untouchable. And sometimes it is nice to just go ahead and give them a little reminder that you can and will be touched if that's what needs to happen. Sometimes the fear of their job, their mom, their dad, their friends, their coworkers potentially knowing what kind of person they are is enough for them to at least self-correct. Now, whether or not that happens is to be determined, but I will definitely be keeping my eye on him. So on to our next subject. I don't know if you all have been really keeping up with TikTok lately, but there's been an AI boyfriend trend that's kind of gone viral lately. And a lot of Black people have been telling on themselves with their choice in partner. So a few days ago, I ended up posting this video on the timeline, just basically highlighting that every single person that this boy ended up making an AI boyfriend out of was either white or lighter than a brown paper bag. And they weren't the only person. I've seen several other people end up doing the exact same thing. Outside of the fact that this is really creepy, I must admit that they have done a really great job of repackaging anti-Blackness when it comes to social media. For a while, it was just us having to listen to a variety of different TikToks, tweets, Instagram reels about how white men are the best thing since sliced bread. However, that doesn't seem to be enough for them anymore. Now they basically have to come online and create AI-generated versions of the person that they would like to be with in order to further antagonize Black people more. And it's hard for me to rationalize whether or not this is rage bait or if this person is just delusional enough to think that this is a real possibility. And I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but the closest that this person is going to get to landing in a relationship similar to this is when it's going to be AI generated. Because of how colorism, femphobia, and anti-Blackness works in society, it's very unlikely that a fit, masculine, tall, white top is going to prioritize a feminine, average build, nerdy Black bottom. And I don't want people to misinterpret what I'm saying. I think that this person is really cute. I think that they have a lot to offer. They seem like a really nice person. I, however, am just analyzing how society operates in relation to how this person is posting. Because some of these things that people are uploading is just not consistent with reality. Because in my experience, 9 times out of 10, if he were to pop out with somebody, they're typically going to be significantly older, less sought after in their own community, and more than likely a lot less attractive than they are. It doesn't have to be all 3, but it's typically 1 or 2 at the same time. It's not to say that it can't happen, but because these two are on the exact opposite ends of the desirability spectrum, it's very unlikely for it to happen. And here's the thing, I'm not going to discount the fact that these people more than likely have had poor experiences within the Black dating realm as to why their racial self-esteem is in the gutter, but I don't think that chasing after conventionally attractive white men who will never pay you dust is the solution either. In a lot of these cases, I view these people chasing after fantasies as some type of escape mechanism. In a lot of these cases, people will get fed up with colorism, femphobia, anti-Blackness, fat phobia, and how it functions within our community. And a lot of the times they will try to find some outside source that they think that is not impacted by these societal structures, who can love them and view them as a full person without factoring colorism, anti-Blackness, fat phobia. And in a lot of these cases, it's not even necessarily about finding love. It's more so about seeking out white validation. I'll say that in each scenario is different, but I think that in a lot of these cases, people end up getting beaten down because they're constantly being told that they may not be masculine enough, or that they may not be light enough, or that they may not be exotic enough. And instead of unpacking a lot of these issues, we end up seeing people internalize them and start perpetuating them as a form of coping mechanism. It's kind of like that scenario where in high school, the nerd goes for the cheerleader. He doesn't necessarily like her because he thinks that she has a great personality or that they have anything in common. It's more so that she is a status symbol, and their presence or willingness to date somebody who is not necessarily deemed conventionally attractive is a way to essentially validate these people's egos that despite the obstacles of colorism, anti-blackness, femphobia, that they were still able to obtain somebody who the dominant society views as conventionally attractive. I tend to view these scenarios more so as a conquest rather than these people building a relationship based off mutual interest. And just thinking about it from a logical standpoint, it just feels very counterproductive to do things like this, because if you are someone who is afflicted by colorism or anti-blackness, it doesn't make sense in my mind to go to the demographic that has perpetuated it. A lot of these structures that people are suffering through now were built by these people's forefathers then, and they're being upheld and passed down generation after generation after generation. I promise after this I'm done beating it like a dead horse, but I feel like it's important to keep reminding people of how this recent election has gone and how this current administration is currently moving now. And my best piece of advice to a lot of people who are still on the fence about where the direction of this country is going, I highly suggest you just turn on one news channel per night, because you're going to see very quickly that this administration is making it very clear that they don't think that we're qualified to do even the most basic of things. They're sprouting medical racism. They're cutting programs and laws that make it easier to discriminate against us. So this can just not be the demographic that we keep coming online and listening to you all say that you want every 3 to 5 business days. At some point, these people are going to have to wake up and realize that these people do not like you, and you're not going to get very far with them. So, on to the final person. This one goes by the name of Stroke Melion. Kind of what prompted this discussion is I've noticed him use his platform on the timeline within the last year or two to try and push back on Black dating, Black unity. And it came to no surprise to me that a few days ago, he ended up doing a white boyfriend reveal. And you all know me. I don't mind being a party pooper for people who behave like this. You don't get to come online and derail these subjects as if you actually care about them, when in reality, you just want to be up some white man's asshole and expect me to let you enjoy your partner reveal. So naturally, the only option was for me to return the favor and go to work. Needless to say, it didn't take very long for me to find an abundance of anti-Black and colorist tweets. However, one tweet in particular that caught my eye that I felt the need to respond to was where he said, "I really want to know what's y'all's issue with interracial content / relationships. It doesn't make sense. Why can't a Black man fuck or date a white man? If it wasn't for interracial relationships, I wouldn't be on this earth. It's just crazy how y'all hate seeing it." In which I respond, to answer your question, a large part of why people have reservations about interracial relationships is because most people, like yourself, enjoy playing into / normalizing racist BBC Mandingo stereotypes. And below I end up attaching some tweets that just kind of support what I'm saying, where he essentially ends up stating that every white person that he's ended up being with, he's made them his slave, that he makes them wait on him hand and foot, and he basically just really plays into this very BBC Mandingo type aesthetic. And I want to first and foremost preface this by saying that I actually have very low expectations of race loyalty when it comes to people who may be biracial or multiracial. However, I don't appreciate when they use their proximity to Blackness to try and derail these conversations that are very important within the Black community and insert themselves into these conversations as some type of authority, but then try to play the biracial card when people ask you to be race loyal. Don't try to make yourself the spokesperson of Black issues if you know that there's a conflict of interest that you won't be able to overcome. And I feel like a lot of these people are really just overcompensating. They're not necessarily here because they want to be here. They're here because they have to be here. I feel like a lot of people who talk like this would love to be in proximity to very white spaces, but ultimately because they pass more so for Black, that's just not possible for them to do. So therefore, I think a lot of them just end up tolerating being in these spaces because essentially they have nowhere else to go, and they know that there's not going to be much expectations in regards to race loyalty. I feel like if more Black people put their foot down about the fence riding, we would actually be better off in general as a community, because it's one thing for you to derail these conversations. It's another for you to cosplay as a Black person and then play into racist stereotypes. That is definitely not anything that we need in order to go ahead and further advance our community. Because even though you may be a biracial person who passes for Black, it doesn't change the fact that half of your family side may be white or non-Black. And again, this is perfectly understandable if you don't feel obligated to pick a side. But again, that doesn't mean that you deserve a space to speak, let alone air out your grievances on why we shouldn't be pushing back against anti-Blackness. And that's why I feel like it's important to make a distinction when it comes to Black and biracial people sometimes. Because even while someone may pass for Black, the influence that a non-Black parent or non-Black family has over a person is undeniable. And it's not to say that Black people don't have colorist and anti-Black tendencies that may also push someone to wanting to date white. But my general point is that the presence of a non-Black person or non-Black family being in this person's life adds a certain layer of pressure that wouldn't be present in a fully Black household. And in general, it's going to be a lot more challenging for someone who may be biracial or multiracial to see value in Black dating when their own parent didn't really seem to prioritize it. Because while there may be dysfunctional Black families, the fact that these two have decided to choose each other serves as a symbol of Black unity that, again, is just not going to be present in an interracial household. Now, I'll throw in some caveats. Of course, there's going to be some biracial and multiracial people that grew up in very racist or anti-Black environments that end up pushing back on this behavior, and I've seen plenty of that. But then there's going to be a lot of people who operate like this, who tend to internalize and perpetuate a lot of the behavior that they may have seen growing up at home. And that's why I say that I have low expectations of people who may be biracial or multiracial, because I know that the situation is more complicated than if you were just a fully Black person. And that's why I don't think that they should be pigeonholing themselves into one category like that, because ultimately you're going to probably end up either disappointing yourself or disappointing others. So to get back on topic, his response to my tweet was, instead of hating on the fact that I made a genuine connection with someone outside of sex and actually date this person, y'all are fixated on skin tone, which is redundant coming from the gay community when we're literally the rainbow flag. And my response to this is a tweet that he made stating, I just need another light-skinned verse that's at least 6 foot, has a career, no trauma, comes from a good family dynamic, and that's a freak. So, okay, it's okay for you to fixate on skin tone, but when I bring it up, all of a sudden it's a problem. And it's so asinine to me that anyone who would sit here and tweet about wanting white ass all day long, having a problem with someone bringing up race or color. Again, you are not Hannah Montana, and you cannot have the best of both worlds. And this next part is going to be a little bit petty, but I really don't care. I think what irritates me the most about people like this is they typically have extremely high expectations when it comes to Black people, but every single time you turn around, their Black partners look like the bottom of someone's shoe. And I'm sorry that this girl had to catch a stray, but is he serious? He really thinks that's attractive. I had to blur it out, obviously, because we're on YouTube, but I'm like, why is this happening? That's why I'm really persistent about doing my catfish test on a lot of Black or mixed men that I date, because 9 times out of 10, you're competing with somebody who looks like this, and I'm not going to have any part of it. I'm not a shallow person, but you're not going to have me looking like Beyonce, and you're willing to get into bed with somebody who looks like the Hunchback of Notre Dame. I'll be honest with you all, when I see people start tweeting things like this, I immediately unfollow. I don't feel the need to engage. I'm not going to ask any questions. I'm just going to assume that there is a reason why you feel the need to come online and push back against anti-Blackness, and it's more than likely because you are probably up some white person's asshole. I don't even think that he understands that the question he's asking in itself is a problem. If you understand that Black people are disproportionately affected by white supremacy in every single way, whether that's from dating, from employment, from incarceration, then why would you come online and use your platform to ask a question on why we may not feel comfortable about people glorifying relationships with the same people who are disenfranchising us? I don't know if this person just lives on a different planet, but these people are literally going out of their way to make sure that we don't get employed, that it's harder for us to get homes, that it's harder for us to get loans. And again, I understand that it's not every single white person, because a large portion did vote for Kamala Harris, but to come online and act obtuse over why Black people may have reservations about these unions is, in my opinion, intellectually dishonest. And that's why I'm very skeptical of people who frame conversations around anti-Blackness this way, because most of the time it's not really coming from a place of honesty. A lot of the times there's ulterior motives as to why they're asking these questions. And that's why I'm really big on searching through people's pages for keywords before I actually end up engaging with them. Because again, a lot of these people are operating in bad faith. They know that they have a history of anti-Blackness, and a lot of them do perpetuate the things that we do talk about. But because they think that we're not going to do research, or that we can't look into their Twitter history or their profile history, they end up inserting themselves into these conversations and making a fool of themselves. So I think that will do it for our first volume. If you enjoyed the video, like, subscribe, and comment, and I will be happy to see you in the next one.